Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Superfeeler podcast. I'm just here to give you a little heads up before this episode starts that we ended up actually recording for over 2 hours, which is a lot. So I know some of you prefer to have your episodes shorter, and some of you prefer to have your episodes longer. Given that, I have cut this episode into 2 parts. So this first half of the episode will be more so focusing on the language around suicide, the stigma around suicide, and then just us starting to talk a little bit about our own experiences with suicide and suicide attempts. Then the second part of the episode is going to be more so around our individual experiences with suicide, how our families and relationships around us have interacted with those, and going into what our protective factors are and why we stay alive and how we stay alive. So I hope you enjoy the episodes. There's 2 of them. If you really like shorter episodes, I know most of mine are about an hour-ish long, and I've done polls and it always ends up being basically 50-50 on how long you want these episodes to be. So I personally like longer form content podcasts because I end up listening to podcasts all day, every day, and I prefer the conversational approach. But if you also like having episodes that are more edited, shorter, more concise, there's a new podcast that just came out called Brain Stories. You can totally check them out, and they have much shorter content, not just specific to borderline personality disorder, but there is going to be an episode about BPD that I think you might want to check out with an individual named Gwen. So she's amazing, and it was a really interesting listen, and they're about 35 minutes long, so much shorter if that's what you're into. In the meantime, take a listen to this episode on suicide with some of our dear friends. Hope you enjoy. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Superfeeler podcast. My name is Lori, and I am joined today by Shane, Kat, and Shannon. Shane calling from the US, Kat calling from Scotland, Shannon calling from Australia, and me calling from Canada. So we've got a very wide range of geography at the very least. Today, we were just kind of joking about this topic will be, or that we love recording together. It's so much fun. Today's topic is suicide, so maybe less fun than usual, but it's important to talk about. Given the topic, obviously, please listen with your discretion. We're not going to go into details of self-harm, suicide, methods or anything like that, but we're still going to talk about it. So I think that it'll be more in depth than it is in most episodes. So just, listen with care. If you have to pause it, do your skills, go hold on to some ice cubes, put your face in ice water, go for a walk, right? All of the things that we know can help. And the reason that this topic is so important is not only is it a symptom of borderline personality disorder, it's also something that affects people with borderline in a huge way. So depending on the stat you look at, it can be as many as 70% of people with borderline have attempted suicide at least once in their life. And then the stat, and I never know exactly how accurate this is, but it's been the number for a very long time, but as many as 10% of people die by suicide that have borderline, which is the highest suicide rate in any psychiatric condition. So that's 1 in 10 people that are likely to die by suicide because of borderline personality disorder, which is obviously absolutely devastating. And part of the reason that it's so important that people have access to care, have access to community, have the information that they need about their disorder, and that we can try and help others build a life worth living so that suicide doesn't feel like the only way out. A couple of things around language around suicide. So you potentially use committed suicide in your general day-to-day language. I'm pretty anti that language because suicide is not a crime. It used to be, which is kind of wild. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It's kind of like the whole drowning witches thing. But it used to be a crime. It is no longer a crime. And so I try and use the words died by suicide rather than committed suicide. I also try to use, some people say suicided. That one just kind of is weird to me, but use whatever you want for those on the call. Dave joined us also, so happy to have you here. Yeah, so I don't know, is there language differences in everybody else's countries? What is the common use of language around the world?
I think here common would be committed suicide, but I would also say died by something. I think officially, the NHS would say completed suicide.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And like a lot of people online use unalived now.
Yeah, that too. I mean, unalived is that always reminds me of like trying to get past Instagram censors. I don't know, like it seems like
Yeah,
a very
exactly.
like
Yeah, because YouTube
millennial.
say it. Yeah.
Yeah, which is also freaking
Unalived is
dumb. I mean,
definitely very,
Mm-hmm.
it's very millennial Gen Z.
yeah, Gen Z. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, which is dumb. I mean, I get shadow banned all the time on my social media platforms because I use the word suicide because I don't think we should not talk about it. I think it's important
Yeah.
to talk about, but it does affect your algorithm. So if that's what you're going for, it definitely screws you up. Shane, you're the youngest of all of us. What do you hear in your groups?
I would say I hear unalive the most. It comes across my FYP like often.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see suicide show up on your FYP ever? Like the word?
If I do, there's always like a couple letters that have an asterisk
Yeah.
in there.
Which I just hate that. Like obviously I understand like it's a triggering word, but it's real and it's important, you know?
Yeah.
The word, it's not the triggering part. Sorry, say that one more time, Kat.
I see it, but then that's because I talk about it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Shannon, what about in Australia? What do you find the language is around suicide?
Definitely committed suicide is the main used one. And then I think the attempt to make that better was successfully completed suicide. I really struggle with the word
the
successful.
Yeah. Same with failed suicide attempt because
Yes.
then it's I failed again. Yeah. Those are problematic too.
Yeah. So I do see unalived, but that's more around social posts. Again, I think trying to bypass algorithms and stuff. I agree. I think we need to use the word and we need to get real comfortable using the word because if we can't say the word, how are we going to ever tell someone when we feel like that?
100%.
Totally. Yeah, definitely. Dave, what language do you hear in your area of the States around suicide?
You know, I've heard all this stuff. You know, I realize, you know, I'm it's a subject that I feel very strongly about, and also I understand that people, you know, like I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings, but I think that, you know, the one main thing that I worry about is that the worst thing and like the worst risk is, I think, as a layperson, is where someone's isolated and doesn't feel like they can talk about what's going on inside without there being all kinds of problems. And I think that the changing language, like putting asterisks and things, it sends a message that like it's not okay to talk about it. Like it sends a message that it's okay to feel that way, but it doesn't in any way support people feeling like it's okay to talk. And then also when there's just this sense of like, you know, there are some areas where language, it's like worth having a fight over. In this one, if you make people feel like, oh, if I use the wrong word or something, then it's going to turn into a debate over my language. And if I'm sensitive enough, it's just the same thing. It just shuts people down from talking about it. So
yeah,
I think commit suicide is very important. And I don't judge anyone who says unalived. For me, unalived is like something that happens to you. It's like, you know, it's not really, if you think about it, like, you know, lots of things, you know, our animals get unalived when they are killed and eaten for food. I mean, it's like if I end my life, it's going to be an action that I take. And I think there's something important about making sure that like that's part of the language as well. Again, not to like put people on the spot, but just so that people feel fully comfortable talking about it and being open to people.
I think like in my circle, we talk about it a lot. And like I am active in a lot of circles where people openly write poetry about it, talk about it, do art about it and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we're definitely in a weird group of people where suicide is not a weird topic for us to talk about.
I was gonna say I find this really interesting to hear y'all like say that people don't talk about it enough or censor the way that they talk about it, because I know so many young people that it's a part of just regular conversation. It's like it's almost become like a part of meme culture, I almost want to say.
Yeah, it has been.
Yeah, like any minor inconvenience, like, oh, I'm gonna kill myself. I know so many young people where that's like their mentality. So to me, in the circles that I run in, like it's
almost
common
like too talked about.
Yeah, it's like it's talked about too much a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense to me. And I've been in really nice, there were places where like part of the thing that was so nice was being around people who could talk about it. One thing that just occurred to me is there's a difference between talking about it with people who don't have any particular expertise or relationship such that they have any obligation to actually do anything for me, whether it's people online or people in a group like this. I mean, it's great, but do I feel comfortable talking about it with my parents? And I wonder, younger people who are online are talking with friends a lot about it in very explicit ways. Like, how many of them frequently, comparatively, is it the same, more or less, who speak to their parents about it or speak to a trusted family member, a brother, a sister, an aunt? I suspect the numbers would be much, much, much lower, but that's just my hunch.
Having young adult children, I've watched them sort of grow up through this social media, like as it was sort of introduced, Snapchat, TikTok, that kind of thing. And I have to be very careful about how I say this because I don't want to diminish anyone's real experience. But I have found a lot with the kids in a parenting role that they've brought this stuff back to me and said, my friend has said that they're thinking about suicide, or my friend has said that they're planning on taking their own life. They might get that message that night and then heads to school the next day, and that friend's fine and everything's great. And I know better than anyone that you can have big feelings and those feelings can change very quickly. So I don't place judgment on any of this, but I'm also concerned that in that generation, there is a tendency to attach to that when you have minor distress and maybe use it, not always, but like as a bargaining tool or an attention-seeking behavior, which fixes that immediate crisis for them. And I worry about the impact of what that happens then for other people who are actively suicidal when we have a group of people who are talking about it regularly and what a big role it plays in their life. If I'm hearing about it here, those people are obviously going through hospital doors and stuff. And then I wonder about the burnout in the medical thing of when there's a whole ton of people coming in and say, oh, I might be suicidal or I'm having suicidal thoughts. Then when someone turns up who is actively suicidal, is there a burnout that occurs around that, not just for medical staff, but also for the people that are listening to it, all the time?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I think there is 100% the burnout of medical staff for sure. I almost feel like I'm kind of in between the generations here, right? Like I'm a little bit younger than some of you and I'm a little bit older than Shane. And I work with people who are, kind of on both sides as well. I almost feel like in Shane's age range and younger, it's almost like it's talked about. And Shane, correct me if I'm wrong, because maybe I just sound like a really old lady right now. But in that generation, it's talked about, but it's talked about in a way that is super passe. Is that the way to say it? Or nonchalantly, oh, I'm just gonna kill myself.
It's very passive.
Right. It's not, I don't think they're gonna kill themselves. And the problem is, I have actually the episode that starts this season off is if you haven't listened to it yet, I think it's hilarious. It may not be hilarious, but it was really funny for me. My 3 best friends of 15 years interview me. And one of the things that we talk about is one of my friends and I send each other suicide memes all the time. But both of us are worried about each other being actually actively suicidal. And it's to the point where, every once in a while you have to check in and be like, are we just kind of trauma bonding, or is this actually a problem? And I think because of my experience and my work and all that stuff, we can have that conversation around are there actual risks here? Are you going to kill yourself? And speak about it in a really intentional way. But I do worry that some of the younger people are just kind of saying this left, right, and center. And one day somebody's actually going to die by suicide, and it's going to come as a huge shock. And that is a devastating thought. First of all, Shane, am I kind of right in that analysis of
Yeah,
youngins?
I mean, yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, I feel like, you know, when it's talked about, I would say it's almost used as like a coping skill,
Mm-hmm.
as I think that for a lot of us, we feel that there's no hope for our future.
Which is so
And
fair.
having this kind of like joke that you can put in your pocket, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of having some form of escape provides some of that relief.
Totally.
It's you know, so I think that that's kind of where it comes from. That's just my interpretation of it. So
That makes a ton of sense. And the world is so messed up that I don't blame anybody for needing that release, that escape hatch in your
Would
back pocket.
anyone here argue that that is any different to active suicidal ideation?
I do think my perception of it, and I do want to get into our experiences with suicidal ideation because I think that there will be a lot of things. And I know, Kat, your hand's up, so give me 1 second. But I think it's slightly different in that there's no like intent to actually do anything. But Kat, let's go to you because I don't want to bounce around you.
No, no worries. I have like another point, but like certainly the kids that I used to work with had intent. And yes, they did talk about it a lot, but also there were quite a lot of attempts that would be kind of under the radar or like something parents wouldn't notice, but they would all be talking to each other about it and be messaging all night and stuff like that. And then I think, you know, like, because I'm older than you are, but like we had forums. So I was on, there was a really good forum in Britain run by the National Self-Harm Network, which was a charity. And it was just some people with lived experience. And it was just such a place of honesty and connection. And there was a crisis thread, but there were also lots of silly threads. And we just talked about everything. But everyone, you know, with some regularity would have attempted or have self-harmed and have been in distress. And it was just kind of so nice to have those conversations with people that understood and felt the same.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was very different. Like I would never have told anyone in my like physical life.
Mm-hmm.
But like those people, we were so tight. Like some people I'm now friends with on Facebook because we got close.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was a really, really special place. And like we had our own emoticons and stuff. It was really cool. But so I have kind of had to realize that that's different to how other people grew up, because other people didn't grow up talking about it and being honest and just having a community of people that understood. And much as that was, you know, mostly staying up all night on the computer, I feel really lucky that I had that.
Totally. I mean, community is all of it, you know? We all need that community. And I do want to acknowledge before we maybe get into like our own experiences that we are, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but we're 5 white people. And we're 5 white people that I don't think are super religious, or any of us like raised super religious. I know a lot. I've heard a lot of really sad stories, and I want to, for some reason, at least in like the people kind of in my like around me and who have told me these stories, Catholicism is such a big part of their life. But there's also huge religious and cultural components to how people perceive and talk about suicide. And so I just want to say
people lie.
Yeah, like I mean, I know of 2 people who, again, I think it's a fluke, but they're both Catholic and who were kids when they died by suicide, or kids or like young adults. And neither were allowed to be buried with their family. Neither were allowed to have a funeral because they did something that was, you know, a sin or whatever. We obviously have our own biases in terms of maybe it is a little bit easier for us to talk about. And if there's anybody here, anybody listening to this that has, you know, is from a different culture that is really like talking about suicide or anti-suicide, and there's a ton more stigma, please reach out because I would love to showcase that perspective as well.
I appreciate what you said. I have a bias against people who won't let their relatives who are so mentally struggling that they killed themselves, they let them be buried with the family.
That's why people
I don't
lie about it and say it's something else.
think that's just wrong. Like, no matter what cultures,
Oh, it's wrong for sure.
it's totally wrong. Yeah.
It's disgusting. It's disgusting. But it happens. It happens. And I think like that is awful and it's really wrong. I can't imagine making that decision knowing that that's how you're going to be treated after you're dead. Do you know what I mean? Things have to be so bad to make that decision, period, let alone make that decision and know that you're not going to get sympathy or people regretting not helping or all of these other things that like I think most people would experience or would have that thought of like maybe people will now realize that it was as serious as it was.
Yeah. And there's a lot of
But then-
desperation. Like
Yeah.
when you talk to people on helplines and stuff,
Mhm.
people are really, really stuck.
Totally.
We've literally just discussed both sides of that spectrum, like the tip of the seesaw. And I think that's the whole goal of us having this conversation, is to be able to look at that spectrum and find somewhere on it where it helps. Like I gave that example of the kids, and then after listening to Kat, and I was like, I wonder how different my life would have been if in my late teens I had people who were willing to talk about it. You know, so I don't think any of us have the answers.
No, I don't think there is an
But-
answer.
Yeah, the more that we talk about it, the more I hope that people can maybe see their experience and feel less alone and find the part in which they're comfortable.
Yeah, and the more we talk about it, the more that's likely to happen. I mean, I think about one time where I was very, very suicidal and I was like, I need to go to the hospital. And I lived with my dad. And my dad was like, no, you don't. And then I said, yes, I really do. So he said, okay, fine. So he drove me to the hospital in silence and then gave me like $20 for cab money to come home because he just could not talk about it. And that sucks. And it felt really like invalidating and unsupportive. But he also just like he didn't know how to talk about it. And it's probably because he was so scared that he was just like, what's going to happen if my kid kills themselves? I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm sure my dad has had many suicidal thoughts in his life, knowing my dad. And for those of you who know my dad and have heard him speak, like, you know that too. But had we been able to have more of a conversation of like, how can I support you? What's going on? You know, do you want me to pick you up from the hospital? You know, that would have been a very different experience than just like, here's $20. I'll see you when you get home.
How are the hospitals there?
Hospital care for people with personality disorders in particular, suicidal ideation in particular, are not a great resource, but it's the only resource beyond like crisis lines. But if you're actually like, I need something immediately to support me, unfortunately, it's the only option. And my experience in emergency rooms for suicidal ideation is they basically just sit you there until you're fine and then you go home. And they often don't treat you very well or at all. I think my favorite experience, actually, it was the same day that my dad drove me and then he, didn't really talk about it, is I was sitting there and then a nurse, I guess I'd been moved from like one triage area to another triage area. And then I heard a nurse say, let me have her. I'm the borderline whisperer. And then she turned around and didn't know that I had been moved to right behind her. And I said, oh, this will be fun. That's what they say about me. And she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, you weren't supposed to hear that. And I was like, yeah, duh. Of course I wasn't supposed to hear that. Are you fucking kidding me? So like the stigma is real. Lack of support is real. I mean, it's very much here. Like you go in, they triage you, you sit there for 8 to 12 hours, and then they send you home, basically. Or, you know, sometimes they'll keep you, but unfortunately there's this, and the experts, if any experts are listening to this, they're going to criticize me for this take, but there's a lot of belief that letting people with borderline into hospitals when they're suicidal is just like reinforcing their attention-seeking behavior and reinforcing their desire to get cared for, essentially.
That's very
So-
old school BBT.
It is very old school, and that is actually Marsha Linehan, who created dialectical behavior therapy. That is in her original texts. She's a huge proponent of this narrative as well. And she's not the only one. I mean, I think that because she's kind of the guru, it's a very common, she said it explicitly in her texts, right? And I think people kind of took that to heart. I think that's bullshit. And I think if somebody is showing up to a hospital, especially knowing that they're going to be treated probably badly, and is saying, I desperately need help, you should give them help. But that's a pretty pervasive belief.
Quite a hot take you got there.
What a hot take. Give them help if they're asking for help. Yeah. Thanks, Shane.
That's such
I try my best. I don't know. What is it like? Like, have you guys been to hospitals when you're suicidal? Like, what is it like for you? I'm curious.
I have been 2 different times, and it's not fun. That the hospitals I were both nice hospitals, but in general, but it wasn't. I think if I was someone who was just overreacting, feeling big feeling in the moment, but I think what Shane mentioned earlier, where it's just more of like there's not danger imminent. If you went to the hospital and didn't get out until they let you out, I would never do it again. You know what I mean? Like, it's not fun. You don't go to like a nice therapy ranch and you get like therapy all the time, and like, you get to be healthy, and it's just, you're just like in a room. Nothing's comfortable. Like, and you don't know when you're going to get out. It's for one thing, which is like keeping you safe and then transitioning you to somewhere that you can like take the next step. But it's medication and keeping people safe. And you have to, one thing is you have to approach it that way. It's not even like a regular hospital visit, where you get like visitors and ice cream and stuff. Like if you have your tonsils out, it's like a holding cell until they can send you.
Honestly, that's a really good word for it. It's a holding cell. Shane, I'm really curious about your perspective, because you and Dave are both in the States, different ages, different, I think, like, socioeconomic status, I would assume, and like potentially different insurance. So what does it look like for you when you go to a hospital?
I mean, it's similar to what Dave said. I mean, how they treat you. I will say, like, my personal experience, I've been twice, and I would say like the staff was really nice. I wasn't expecting the staff to be really nice. Now one was in Oregon and one has been in Virginia. Virginia staff was like not as nice, but they weren't terrible. So, I mean, that's really, I feel like, all that I can speak to it. Now, the way I experience, suicidality is, mine's very passive suicidal ideation, I would say. So I've actually never truly made an attempt. I've only had like self-harm incidences or episodes. And we talk about, Lori, in my episode that I do one-on-one with you, like the extent of my self-harm. I feel like I've done it in many different ways. It looks very different for me. So yeah.
Can we just acknowledge how sad it is that you, and I agree with you, but how sad it is that you said, I wasn't expecting the nurses or the healthcare providers to be so nice. You would think that we would all go into a healthcare situation and be like, everybody's going to be super nice, but our bar is so low that is not how we experience healthcare a lot of the time. Dave.
Just a quick, for those of you who have like a sane medical system, just to sort of get a sense of like what goes on here with insurance companies. So I was going, the first time I went to the hospital, I had been going to DBT therapy for about a year. And I have really good insurance because I work for the federal government. And so it didn't cover the group. It maybe covered like a third of the cost for my weekly therapy session. So it's like a third of what I'm that they'll give me money back for. When I went to the hospital, but they're kind of, it's not that easy to get reimbursed and stuff like that. So they basically won't pay for DBT. When I went to the hospital, I was there for less than 24 hours, and the insurance company, with no questions asked, forked out $26,000 to pay for it.
For one day at the hospital?
No questions asked. I really didn't have to do any paperwork. It's just, I got the bill.
That's not the part that I'm surprised about. I'm surprised about how the frick it costs $26,000 to be in a building for 24 hours. Oh my God.
Well, or that's
but do you have to pay up front?
Not to get way into the insurance, but it's like, that's not the real cost. Like they like negotiate crazy things. So it has nothing to do with like what it cost to be there. It's just, that's what the insurance company was like, we won't pay for DBT, but like hey, you know, the guy goes to the hospital. Sure, $26,000. Let's hand it over. It's such a fucked up way of thinking about things.
Right, because if you were to pay $26,000 worth of DBT, you would avoid hospital visits for so many times. And that is research. I don't have the stats off the top of my head, but there's a lot of research to show that DBT prevents hospital visits. It prevents other chronic health problems down the line. It prevents police interaction. It prevents incarceration, like all things that cost the government money or I guess cost the government money in, again, countries with a normal healthcare system. I don't really know what the cost benefit analysis for the US government would be, I suppose, but still, it's bizarre. Preventative health is way more important. That's crazy. I can't even imagine. I will say, this is a side note, so I am obviously very pro like universal healthcare, but we were in Mississippi for just like a vacation, and Aaron got strep throat, and for like $200 USD, and we tried so hard to avoid going to the doctor, but it was really bad, and I was like, you need to go. For $200 USD, we were in and out of a walk-in clinic with a prescription in like an hour, and that is not at like 9 p.m. at night on a weekend or something crazy. So like, you know, I can understand for like really small things like that, it's nice to be able to just pay and then leave. But I also remember my grandma, who lives in the States, like shattered her foot. She like fell on ice and she shattered her foot. And every time I went to visit her, she would ask if the hospital bill had come yet. It's just devastating to think that like you're trying to heal from something and you're worried about the cost of it. It's truly a different world. Kat, wait, did I already ask you, Kat, what it's like when you go to hospital?
I've been once because the support worker I had at the time was like, you really need to make them aware of where you're at. So I rang up the crisis team and they were like, why are you phoning us? And I was like, because I've been told I should come and see you. And they were like, why? I was like, because I'm suicidal. And then they were like, well, can you come in at like 6? And I was like, yeah. So then I went at 6 and I went to the desk and I was like, the crisis team is expecting me. And then I was there for like until 3 a.m. So what is that, like 12, like however long that is. And then like got questioned for an hour, and then they didn't admit me. Yeah, we're here for like people who are really struggling and you just seemed like you needed a chat. So then I left and phoned a helpline in Southampton. So that was a great experience. Yeah. I wouldn't go back.
Totally.
Which is weird because now like there is no last line of defense, because I was always like, well, if it, you know, that's where you go, and it's like, well, I wouldn't go there. So, but then the times I've attempted, I didn't even consider telling anyone. So,
and that's, I think, the consequences of their actions, if that makes sense.
That was the most recent times. That was after.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been explicitly told, like, try harder next time when it comes to self-harm. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, great, thanks. I'll see myself out then. Shannon, what about you?
I haven't been to emergency when I have been suicidal. I have been to emergency a lot for extreme panic attacks before I knew I had BPD, and had a bunch of mixed experiences. Some were really great, others were not at all. When I went to hospital after a suicide attempt, and I think our system might be similar. So we have public system, which is paid for by the government, and then we have private system, which is funded by our insurance. So in the public section, which I can't remember a lot of because I had attempted suicide, they took me to one hospital and then transferred me to another. And I only know that because Scott told me. Once I was coherent enough, which was probably day 3, I knew I was going to reattempt, and I thought, okay, I'm here. This is what they do. They help you with this. And I went out and I spoke to the nurse and I said, I'm not safe. Like, I don't know what you guys have to do about that, but I'm telling you, like, this is my plan. Like, I'm going to reattempt. And she was like, okay, we'll send someone up and just send me back to my room. and I reattempted after I sat there for a while and no one came.
Was it, sorry, just out of curiosity, was it a mental health unit that you were on?
I was in a mental health unit in a public hospital.
So, I mean, we don't need to get into the details of reattempting, obviously. Normally, I think they try and have like the rooms set up in a way that's not.
Yes, the rooms were definitely set up in a way, but
yeah, but we are creative people.
We are very creative people when we need to be.
Yeah, totally.
And I won't go into because you don't want to share those ideas, but
yeah, I mean, personally, I just don't think it's necessary. If somebody feels very differently, agree. I'm happy to address that, but
I agree, Laurie. I don't think it's necessary, especially in that sense. But someone eventually came like a while later, and then they just moved me to the other section, which was like the cells that Dave were talking about. It felt like I was in prison. It was incredibly scary, but it's where I needed to be, and it kept me alive until Scott could navigate the system on the outside and get me to a private hospital, because a private hospital here will not take you if you are actively suicidal.
The systems. This is another reason that I kind of like the wording "die by suicide" instead of "commit suicide," because I feel like Dave, I totally hear what you're saying around it is an action that you committed. However, also it's a system that really failed you, and I don't think it's ever an individual decision. Do you know what I mean? It's more than just an individual issue, I think.
No, just to be clear, like I don't have a problem with any of that stuff. It's just, I think that it should be. It's not a nice, pretty thing or something that, you know what I mean. It's so use whatever language you want. I mean, commit suicide sounds like a crime, so maybe
exactly.
People don't want to say that, but like at the end of the day, there's like a lot of ugliness. There's a real ugly side to it.
Mm-hmm. Totally. No, totally. I just wanted to, address the systems are at fault in a lot of ways, and it is never an individual. I don't believe that, this is a one and done decision that was not influenced by some systems that really failed them. Shannon.
So just before I coughed up a lung.
Yeah. Started dying on us.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that once I got transferred to that private hospital, it was incredible. The care I received there was exceptional. The facilities are amazing. So much stuff on hand. But you have to have private health insurance, and the immediate, I don't know how yours works, Dave, but we pay an excess depending on what our coverage is. So you pay that excess up front and then they take you. My hospital stay when I got the bill, which goes straight to the private health insurance, was $980 a day. So very different to $26,000 a day, but still unachievable.
And didn't your hospital have a fucking pool?
It did have a pool, yeah, and a gym. And
good Lord.
It like even the food was better than what I eat at home. Like it was amazing. There was people that come in and did boxing lessons, and there was a yoga instructor, and there was art therapy. Like it was so amazing. That is the stuff that will save lives. And
that's actual treatment versus babysitting.
Yes, 100%.
That's the difference.
You had access to a social worker, a psychologist, and a psychiatrist. So you would see the psychologist twice a week, psychiatrist once a week. Social worker was there all the time. Amazing nursing staff. Some were better than others. We had a diversional therapist who, my God, was worth her weight in gold.
What does that even mean?
So diversional therapy is just keeping your mind active, doing things. Morsey, I'm going to mention her name because she is just a gift to the world, and everybody who has been in that facility will 100% say the same thing. This woman saves people's lives. And it might be she organises a barbecue, or she'll just say at the end of the day, what do you guys want to do tomorrow? And one day we did like face masks, and she come around and massaged all our hands, and it was like we were in a spa. And then another day we did like puzzles and stuff, like activities, just things to keep your mind active so you're not laying in bed. It's an excuse to get people out of their rooms, interacting with each other and laughing. Like, we had so much fun with her. Amazing, amazing woman. And her personality made her so great at that role. She just unbelievable, quite naughty, made us laugh a lot. But the fact that they fund that facility funds that, is great. What I will say is that the health insurance that we had to get me into the private hospital didn't cover DBT. So we had to change insurers for me to be able to go to the DBT course that was offered by the same hospital. So they would pay for me to be in the facility, but they would not cover DBT. So on the outside, Scott's negotiating all that, and we had to change providers for me to be able to attend the DBT skills course at the same hospital.
That's bizarre. Does anybody know the justification for insurers not covering DBT? I'm just having a really hard time figuring out what their logic is.
Insurance companies are just very inherently conservative. It takes a long time for them to change anything. So
yeah, I guess so.
There were people connected with Emotions Matter in Florida. There was this guy who I was on a couple calls with him, and he was on a one-to-one basis, just finding people and going after the insurance companies and having some success getting them to cover DBT.
Advocating for them.
That's how small they don't like to cover new stuff here.
But it's not new. DBT's been around since the 80s.
To them,
that's what's
partly
insane.
Because it's more expensive per head because you have more therapist time and stuff.
Yeah,
maybe.
That's why my insurance doesn't work really well for a DBT model, because I get $500 a year in mental health benefits. I'm going to say that one more time. $500 a year in mental health benefits. Thank God Aaron's a unionized employee, and they just raised his from I think I got $100 a year as his spouse last couple of years ago, and now I get $1,500. So that's good. So I get $2,000 total in a year for counseling or any mental health related things, counseling, psychologist, whatever. But so obviously DBT is not a thing. You know what I mean? You can't do DBT with $500 a year worth of benefits. And I also work in mental health for the government, and that's my insurance, just for the record. But it just seems bizarre to me. I mean, the cost benefit analysis has not been calculated properly for these insurance companies, because that doesn't make any freaking sense at all.
I just want to add, in case there is anyone listening from Australia that ever finds themselves in this, say, in a similar situation where they need immediate help. Someone really lovely explained this to Scott when I was still in the private hospital and we were trying to navigate it, because at the time, the coverage that we had didn't cover the hospital. So we had to up our coverage. But to do that, there's a waiting period. But in Australia, there is a clause that once in a lifetime, you can either join or up your private health insurance with no waiting period in the event of a mental health crisis. Now, this is not advertised. We knew nothing about it. It was just that someone really wonderful passed that on, and so you have to then go to your provider and sort of push that and say, hey, I know that this is a thing, but just in case there is anyone listening, I want to pay that forward, because knowing that little bit of information can save your life.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shannon. Yeah, that kind of information is vital. Hi, thank you so much for listening. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, this is now being split into a 2-part episode. So stay tuned next week for part 2 of the suicide symptom, where we will go into more personal stories about our experiences. And we'll also talk through our protective factors of why we stay alive, how we stay alive. And I'm sure you'll love that episode too. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. You can do that on any podcast platform. Subscribe or follow. It depends on which podcast platform you're on. And that way you'll get notified when there's a next episode. Don't forget to rate, review. It really helps, I promise. It makes my life so much easier when people leave reviews. So please do that. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Superfeeler podcast. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded territory of the Matsqui and Sumas First Nations. If you'd like to learn more about the Superfeeler podcast, share your story, or participate in the Superfeelers Club, which is our peer support group, it's totally free, virtual, and open to anyone who experiences intense emotions or has borderline personality disorder, please check out the link in our show notes or go to laurieedmondson.com. If you would like to support the show, we would very much appreciate it. There's an option to do monthly small donations at whatever denomination you'd like, and you get bonus content, extra resources, and extra connection to me throughout. That can be found on patreon.com/superfeeler, or again in the notes below. Thanks again, and have a great day.